welcome to episode 227 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford
and Dylan Moore.
In today's episode, we will be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be concluding our Listener's Choice series with 1978's Movie. We'll talk a little bit more about that selection in that portion of the show, but let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And I kind of want to get started. I feel like there's two movies that we feel better about, and then there's two movies that we have hostile feelings about. And I want to get hostile first. So let's start that way. Andrew, I'm going to start with your hostile movie, and then we'll go to mine.
Oh, no. Okay, so we're going to talk about Bird Box.
Twitter's favorite movie.
Boombox.
Bread Bowl?
My favorite name for it is Bread Bowl. You could also call it Bargain Bin. I feel like it's a Netflix movie.
Wow.
And Netflix has kind of become the place for some movies that otherwise would have been in the bargain bin at Blockbuster or FYE or wherever else in another time. But Bird Box is a horror movie that's, going viral on Twitter at the moment. Everybody's making memes out of it and stuff like that. It stars Sandra Bullock. It has been compared to A Quiet Place because it has to do with your senses, and it has a horror mechanic that it directly ties into people's senses, though it is based off of a book that came out before A Quiet Place. Plot synopsis is weird to do because it is kind of two different narratives stacked on top of each other. You get a 5 years into the future narrative and then a 5 years in the past narrative, and it jumps back and forth between the two of them. In the future narrative, Sandra Bullock is training and they're preparing these two small children, I would say they're like 3 years old, to make this river journey from one end of a very, very long river to the other end of the very long river, and it's going to involve a lot of rapids. It's going to be dangerous for them to get across, especially so because they have to do the entire thing blindfolded, and that is not explained until we go to the other narrative, 5 years in the past, where we see the best analog for it is kind of like a zombie outbreak sort of thing. It reminded me a little bit of Mom and Dad, the Nicolas Cage film earlier this year. But essentially, it is an outbreak of mass suicide. It starts in Russia and then moves to America. People randomly killing themselves as quickly and as efficiently as they possibly can.
It's not like Cure.
It's not like Cure, no. The reason given kind of hints that this is going to be sort of a Lovecrafty movie where there's some sort of spectral presence that has come down to visit Earth, and if a person sees it, for some reason they immediately want to kill themselves in a state of ecstasy and rapture. They want to die in order maybe to be with this thing. It's kind of unexplained. Also, I'll go ahead and spoil, you never see the thing. It does not show you what people look at. Though there are drawings of the thing, different drawings that kind of contradict each other. It is implied that different people see different things for various reasons. But in the past timeline, after the outbreak happens, Sandra Bullock finds herself kind of Night of the Living Dead style, stuck in a house with a bunch of strangers who are trying to keep themselves from this dangerous force that is outside the windows.
The suicide imminence.
Yeah, so they lock all the doors, they cover up all the windows. Anytime they need to go outside, they wear blindfolds so they don't see the thing and want to kill themselves. I'll start with the cast. I want to talk about the cast because I think this is for your consideration, the weirdest cast of 2018. Hold on a second while I just pull up the cast of Bird Box on IMDb because Letterboxd is down right now.
Wow.
The people in this house of Sandra Bullock include John Malkovich.
Yeah.
Lil Rel Howery, Danielle McDonald, who you know from the movie Patty Cakes as well as Dumplin' earlier this year, Machine Gun Kelly and Trevante Rhodes, the third Chiron in Moonlight. And this is just a very strange.
Yeah, I don't know.
The chemistry of this room is just something else. And
that's almost tempting me to watch it, but go ahead.
No, it's not good. It's not a good chemistry.
Hey, BD Wong.
It's just Also, I want to dwell on Trevante Rhodes for a minute. Trevante Rhodes becomes the love interest for Sandra Bullock in this movie.
Okay.
And Trevante Rhodes, very handsome man, photographed very sensually and intimidatingly in Moonlight. He dominates every frame he is in. Every single one of his muscles is gleaming with blue purple light in that movie. Barry Jenkins just photographs him so well. He has no presence here whatsoever, because this section of Bird Box, this half, is filmed like a made-for-TV movie, which makes it feel very appropriate to be on Netflix. It seems like they rushed this into production after A Quiet Place did so well. They're like, what are the biggest names we can possibly get on a short notice? Well, turns out it's Machine Gun Kelly and Laurel Howery and John Malkovich. Let's put them all in a room together and see what they do.
Machine Gun Kelly was like, I've been waiting for this, guys.
Yes, good.
Yeah, think about how appropriate Machine Gun Kelly was in Beyond the Lights. The opposite of that for this movie. Now, horror movies, one of the things I love about horror movies, they're really good about ideas and subtext, theme. Nathan likes to shit on theme, but I think it's a really big strength of the horror genre. And this is a movie that for a long time doesn't really know what its theme is, because it has these two different narratives it's jumping back and forth between. Neither one of them has a very clear structure or conflict or resolution. It feels very episodic. And in the boat journey sequences, it seems to mostly be about this kind of man versus nature sort of survival thing. In the sequence in the house with the crazy mixed up cast, it seems mostly to be about security and how you the ethics of keeping people out in order to protect yourself versus allowing people to come in order to try and save them. And so in a way, this is kind of like a Trump era horror movie that is very much about borders and walls and windows. John Malkovich at one point says the phrase, "We are making the end of the world great again."
Oh.
And
Zach just hurt himself.
He is the character in the movie who is most in favor of borders and walls and making sure all the doors are locked and we're not allowing anybody else to come in. And for much of the movie, it seems that he's going to be proven wrong because he's kind of a heartless bastard. He's also an alcoholic. But the way that narrative ends up playing itself out, he is right. And the people that the other more benevolent members of the house let in end up being crazy cult members of whatever this evil entity is. And John Malkovich was right the whole time, and they have to use his shotgun in order to protect themselves from these evil foreigners that have found their way inside the house. So definitely think this movie is capital P problematic in terms of what it's dealing with thematically. I also think that it structurally is a complete mess. It does manage some scares that are maybe a little cheap, maybe a little gimmicky, but I don't think that it really leans hard enough into the conceit of blind characters trying to protect themselves against an unseen force. I think there are ways that you could deal with that visually a lot better than this does.
Is there no POV shots to let you feel that sensation?
Every now and then it will show you an extreme close up of the blindfold, but it doesn't really let you stay there for too long. Most of the time it's kind of like a medium to close shot of the characters from in front of them, which could be cool, but they don't do enough with it. And there's some potentially interesting thematic stuff that shows up at the very end of the movie, when the movie seems to be interested in like anti-ableism of some sort. You know, this is a world where, for example, blind people are able to flourish in a way that sighted people are not. And so it is implying something about how differently abled people can flourish in different environments, and no one level of ability is better or worse than another, or whatever. But that's really undercut by the way they talk about these like cult members as being like quote unquote crazy. The people who are not super susceptible to the entity but are willing to like become disciples of the entity are people who have like some sort of mental illness and or escape from insane asylums and things like that. They wouldn't call it insane asylums, they would call it mental health hospital, something like that. But if it wants to say something about like ability versus disability, it really fumbles that too. And as a whole, the main problem with this is just that it's really messy and it is nothing to look at. Everybody I watched it with really liked it. They thought that it was entertaining and scary, but I think that a lot of times horror movies can win people over in some very cheap ways, when even though they're not really doing the work of like telling a good story. So that's Bread Bowl.
They're kind of. I think they can kind of be like comedies where you're like, I laughed at stuff, but was it good? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, let's talk a little bit about Vice.
Did it scare you, Zach, or was it a comedy?
It's trying to do both. But to kind of tail in Andrew's discussion, Bird Box is on Netflix, so readily available.
Don't watch it.
Don't watch it. I guess that's honestly that sounded awful. I don't want to watch. Not your work describing it, but just what it sounded like sounds terrible. So Vice. Let's back up a little bit. Adam McKay, mostly known for his work with Will Ferrell as well as SNL. He directed Anchorman, The Other Guys, Talladega Nights, a number of those comedies from the 2000s. Took kind of a shift recently. I think it was 2 years ago or whatever, with The Big Short, which is this satirical portrait of the economic,
a dramatized documentary is what I like to think of it as.
Yeah, of the housing crisis. It has a lot of big names in it. It's very famous for having these like cutaways to like Margot Robbie in a bubble bath explaining, very difficult, convoluted points to you. There's one scene I think with Selena Gomez at a poker table. It has so it's constantly trying to mess with kind of break the third wall and mess with your perception while also inundating you with of these very thick jargonistic terms. And this one is kind of doing the same thing, but this one is covering Dick Cheney, who was the vice president for George W. Bush. And it's somewhat of an autobiographical look at him from where he started to his kind of rise to the political ranks, to leaving politics and becoming the CEO of Halliburton, and then coming back into politics as the vice president for George W. Bush. And all of the, however you would like to see it, either prosperingness of America or the chaos that he brought to America over the course of his tenure as the vice president.
I mean, does the Republican Party even think that was a prosperous time for America? Like, Trump has been very anti-Iraq war, very anti-George W. Bush. I feel like the Republicans have kind of followed suit in revising their history there.
I'm not sure this movie knows what it's wanting to get other than to make you feel bad for not being awake at that period of time. That's really what this movie's going at. And that's kind of the gist of this thing. Let me start by saying Christian Bale plays Dick Cheney, and he gives a fantastic performance. Like, the thing, it's less the, like, him gaining a lot of weight and trying to look a lot like Dick Cheney, and more the way he delivers speech and the way he kind of his little small ticks, like the way he's moving around as Cheney is remarkable, and you can tell he did a lot of his research and kind of figuring out how he kind of just operated as a human being, and that's incredibly impressive. Outside of that, you have Amy Adams, who plays Lynn Cheney. Steve Carell plays Donald Rumsfeld, kind of just working off of his character from The Big Short. He's very bombastic and asinine. Sam Rockwell plays George W. Bush. Number of other people pop up in this movie, including Jesse Plemons, who plays a very random narrator for this movie that I will dig into a little bit later in this discussion. But for the most part, Vice is very in that vein, like The Big Short. It's Adam McKay trying to deconstruct this I would say convoluted, but it's not necessarily convoluted. It's just more of a long rap sheet of a lot of stuff that took place over the course of this time that I guess in his opinion is very overlooked. And let me say that dramatized documentary, Andrew, as you said, is very much what this is. Like, he did take a lot of research from writings and books by a number of authors and journalists who wrote about this period and Dick Cheney in particular, but he also kind of lays on his own view. It was interesting thinking back about this afterwards. It reminded me a lot of trying to hit a lot of the same beats as a movie that came out earlier this year, and that's The Death of Stalin, which is by Armando Iannucci, who did the ironically enough Veep, which is about the vice president of the HBO series. But that one, I was thinking of like how both of these movies approaches satire, and Death of Stalin, like, I rewatched it recently, and it's a movie that I guess you would like to blanket it as it's a comedy, but after watching it, I was like, this really isn't a comedy. It's more just like a despair play that has moments that are supposed to be lightened up as comedy because Steve Buscemi and Michael Palin and Jeffrey Tambor are playing the characters. It's not necessarily like... Exactly, and the thing that's great about that is it's never couching these characters in like you're supposed to find sympathy or humanity for them. It's completely caked in. These are gross, despicable, power hungry, awful men who have no drive other than to screw the other one over and rise to power no matter what, and it's constantly working in that vein. It's not really trying to give you necessarily a historical perspective, rather than just feeding you these awful men and the ways that they are screwing over each other in awful ways, but you kind of can get into it because it's awful men screwing over awful men, and it's just like this whole pile on. This one I don't think Adam McKay understands really how to appropriately use satire, because it's a lot of it is not satirical in that fashion where it's not. This one is very much trying to give you a historical perspective. It's trying to show you this period of time and inform you on what was happening that you weren't paying attention to. I equated this to being directed by a Dems Against Trump Facebook group, because it's like those memes that your family members or people that you know who are over the age of 50 share on Facebook, trying to like clarify that they are, as they say, woke to the ails of our just hurting nation. And again, that does nothing. It just like is a kind of validating one-upsmanship that gives you like an endorphin, and then does nothing for the greater good of the the nation, society, culture, etc. And Vice is kind of
as if being woke just meant calling Republicans idiots.
Exactly. So that's what Vice is. It's kind of just that, and there's some small satirical moments that do work. There's like periodically throughout the film, it takes you out of what's happening because Dick Cheney just like has a heart attack at some point, and Christian Bale will constantly play it very very softly, and it'll be just like this momentous thing happening within the narrative, and he'll just kind of stop and go, yeah, we need to go to the hospital. And then it shows them going to the hospital and he's, getting his heart pumped. There's another moment halfway through the movie where prior to him jumping onto the ticket with George W. Bush, it has this whole kind of fantasy sequence where it talks about how, after the election of Bill Clinton, Dick Cheney, just stayed at Halliburton and just got out of politics forever. And they just sat at home in Virginia and raised their dogs and did nothing within the political realm. And then the credits start to roll and then it stops and then it pulls it all back. And then there's the phone call coming from George W. Bush to start all the horror, for the next hour or so. And those moments are kind of cheesy or kind of corny, but at least feel like it's satirical. It feels like it's working within the satirical realm. And for the most part, this movie is not. It's just assaulting you with how stupid you are for not recognizing this. And it's a complete character assassination of Dick Cheney. And it's not like we should be defending Dick Cheney, but there's no nuance to this. There's no, it's all it is going to give, 50 plus year old liberals a hard on for 2 hours in a movie theater, and then they're going to leave and feel all good about themselves. It doesn't have anything to say really about the era that we're in. It just reinforces a lot of the issues that we have at hand politically and why we're, just kind of running in a wheel, like hamsters, just doing the same thing over and over again. And it has this kind of heavy-handed narration by Jesse Plemons, who we find out later is a Iraq-Afghanistan war veteran who comes home, is hit by a car and dies, and then they use his heart to give Dick Cheney a transplant to give him 10 more years of life, which I guess meant whatever. He's still alive, guys. I mean, he's not dead for real. But the metaphor is that you have Cheney cutting off because his youngest daughter is gay, and he kind of just cuts her. It's always been something that they feel has been holding them back from the presidency and moving forward in the political sphere, because they can always use that as ammo. And later in the movie that he cuts off his daughter and is just like, yeah, we have to kind of send her out into the ocean and leave her if we want to move forward. And you have this whole sequence of the heart transplant and then the showing this charred heart, saying that you have this heart has gone through all of this, and he's being replaced with the heart of a veteran because the American public is continuing to feed this, and it's never going to end. And it's just so heavy-handed and so annoying, and I do not like this movie, and screw you if you like it. The end.
So I have two questions. One, there's no real chance that people who supported Dick Cheney back in the day are going to want to go see this, right?
No, they will hate it.
But will they get into the theater? Will they walk in?
They might, but they might if they didn't watch any marketing prior to this, and they're just like, oh, it's about Dick Cheney, and then they get in the theater, they will leave within 10 minutes. I mean, like I said, it's one of the most damning character assassinations of one person I've seen in a long time.
Second question, I read an article about how originally there was going to be a very prominent musical number in the middle of the film, and at one point it was even edited to basically be the through line of the film. They're going to keep cutting back to the musical number. Having seen it, can you kind of imagine what that would be like, or do you think that the movie would be better with that in there?
Yeah,
because I'm interested. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, because like I said, there is halfway through the movie they have where they have this whole silly sequence where it's saying that he gets out of politics and the credits roll, and it's pretending after that it's all over, and then it starts up the whole George W. Bush campaign in that section of the movie. And I could see where it's happening because, like The Big Short, McKay's constantly trying to break the fourth wall. It ends with Christian Bale turning to the screen and just saying, as Dick Cheney, going, I don't really care what you think of me. I did what I did for my country, and you voted for this, and this is on you as much as me. I did what I morally thought was correct. And he's constantly trying to break, constantly trying to break what you would assume is the guidelines for how you make a movie. And it's not as inspired as that mission is set out.
Well, 2 movies to avoid. for sure.
Yeah, this is a stupid movie. But I'm telling you, the 50+ old liberals are gonna they're gonna love it. It's gonna be just like, I knew that, Bertie. Anyway, no. So my story after I get out of this movie, my friend and I are leaving. We're going in an elevator in the parking garage, and we're going up, and this old couple gets in there with us, and they had clearly gone and seen Vice also, and so they're just like, "What did you think of the movie?" And we were like, "Oh, it was interesting. We're just trying to we got a couple floors to go. Let's just get through this conversation." And then they go, "Did it change your mind at all about Trump pulling out of Syria?" And I was just like, whoa, we're on floor 2, you're on floor 4. That's not enough time to get into that discussion.
Was this movie produced in 2 days?
So we just fumbled through, up there's your floor, see you later.
Jeez.
Yeah. So that's how that went.
But I guess people expect that broad sweeping perspective change from this movie.
It was 50+ year old liberals who wanted to know how millennials thought. That's what it was. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that right now. Especially on an elevator when we're 3 floors away from where you get off. Yeah, no, it was dumb. All right, let's talk about movies that we actually enjoyed. The first one is on. We're going back to a Netflix exclusive. This one was on Netflix. It's called Private Life. It was directed by Tamara Jenkins, and it stars Catherine Hahn and Paul Giamatti, and they play a couple who clearly through the last few years have been dealing with infertility. They're constantly trying to get a baby, whether it's through fertility treatment or domestic adoption. They're going back and forth between those two methods, but keep hitting kind of a wall from succeeding on either fronts. And so it's kind of covering that for probably for the majority of the first half of the movie, and then it shifts into kind of trying to find an alternative form of contraception in the way of using. Oh, I apologize.
Conception.
Conception. I'm sorry. An alternative way of conception where they're gonna use their college-age 20-year-old niece, I believe. Is that the relation that they had? Yeah, niece, to have their baby for them, and that comes with its own set of complications, not just through the actual process, but also just through the perceptions of their extended family. This was a movie that I caught recently in my 2018 catch-up and really enjoyed. Andrew, you caught this as well. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Private Life.
I really enjoyed it too. I don't have a lot of nuanced, elaborate, deep thoughts to share about Private Life. I'm curious to hear what your take is on it. But I mostly just really enjoyed watching it. I thought it was really funny. I enjoyed the pace that it moved at. It's a bit of a longer movie. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. That usually leads me to start a movie with a sense of trepidation. Like, does it need to be this long? Are they going to earn the length? And I thought this really did. It really digs into the sense of impatience that this couple feels, and all of these roadblocks constantly being put up in front of them, and nothing really seems to work. It has a strange structure in that way, because there's not just the one problem that has to be overcome. There's many, 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 many problems that aren't ever really overcome. I thought that it had great acting across the board, especially from Paul Giamatti, as well as the girl who plays the niece. Is that Emily Robinson?
Kaylee Carter.
Yeah, Kaylee Carter. I thought she was fantastic. She was giving me some Saoirse Ronan vibes. As in terms of the script and the tone of this thing, it really felt like a Noah Baumbach film. Those really breezy, pleasant ones like Mistress America, for example. Even though this movie is really dealing with tedium and just petty stuff that really makes couples feel disheartened and discouraged. The movie does have a really nice, light, comedic feel to it, and I I just really loved watching it. Zach, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you mentioned before about the length, and I think that plays into, like you said, kind of the whole process of waiting in this film. This movie is built on, like, I think my favorite scenes are just them sitting in waiting rooms, because you have a lot of these sequences where it's just Paul Giamatti and Kathryn Hahn sitting amongst this, gaggle of people, and you have a mix between people who have like their kids in there or are on their phones or like reading magazines, and you just kind of see them trying to process these very complicated emotions, from all of these different complicated things that they're dealing with, but they're stuck in just this very just overrun space.
Clinical
with
space.
People who it's just kind of all over the place emotionally, and they are just very despondent. My favorite parts of this movie also are the little moments between like the nurses and the doctors, and they kind of try to weave in that kind of atypical kind of doctor humor. They're trying to lighten up the situation because they know it is something that's difficult. But you can definitely see
jokes you can tell that they've told 20, 30
exactly.
times.
And you can just feel the wear on that because they've heard it. Not only have they told it 20 times to just different people, but they've told them 20 times, and they're just kind of like, oh, hold on. This person doesn't agree with my review of Private. I'm sorry.
Hold on.
And you can just kind of like feel that through the way that Jenkins kind of just lingers the camera there. As I think of the one instance where the guy is talking about how his job and how his wife is making fun of his job because all he does is put people to sleep, and they're just like, she's just being lulled into sleep, and you see that scene like 3 or 4 times, and it's just by the 4th time you are just like, oh my god, dude, shut up, it's not funny. It wasn't funny the first time, it's not funny now.
This joke is lulling me to sleep.
Yeah. And then, like you said, it picks up halfway through, and you add this element of this kind of she very much is lost in a way because she's in college. She has like her goals and passions of what she wants to do, but she clearly doesn't necessarily have the focus always to carry out that, even though she is very talented, as we kind of find out by the end of it. And she really sees this special life that her uncle and aunt have, that they, after years of dealing with all of these false negatives and all of these just kind of failures in terms of having a baby, have kind of just worn down, that they don't feel like they really have this luxurious, cushy, kind of bougie New York life, because they're not allowed the kind of satisfaction or the kind of emotional just fullness that they're looking for by the end, and it's kind of fun. It's so interesting to watch that juxtaposition as she's kind of fumbling through her life with much more 20-year-old problems, and then you have this much more heavy problems that this couple is going through, but they're also kind of on the same page and trying to move through this together. I don't know, it does have those kind of that kind of Noah Baumbach-ness, but I also I really like Tamara Jenkins, that she just it has those moments, but like I said, it has these moments of lingering and quietness and just kind of cutting through the noise around them, where you're just focusing on just the kind of emptiness in the faces of Paul Giamatti and Kathryn Hahn, that really just cut through everything and show just the just immense pain that it must be trying to do this to yourself over and over again. And I don't know, it's just almost, it's not depressing, but at the same time you can just feel the pain that they're going through, because not only is it difficult to have the assisted reproduction work, but then they also go through the stories with the adoption process, and that's just as heartbreaking. And it's just remarkable that they're...
Feels very true to
life. It does,
and
it's just remarkable that they're able to... That they have at least enough of a core to stay together. You know, there's never like that... Like, it's interesting because it never really hints at that there's going to be a separation. You know, there's clearly some hostility and they get angry at each other, but it never feels like there's going to be a complete split. It just feels much more true to the relationship that's been dealing with that. And, I don't know. I really recommend this movie. It's on Netflix. Please check it out. But Andrew, you have one last movie.
Well, I think Dylan is going to take the lead on this one. We both watched it this week. But Happy as Lazzaro, Italian film, right?
Yeah, and this is directed by Alice.
Also on Netflix.
Also on Netflix. Alice Rohrwacher, I think her name is. I think it's like her third or second movie. But yeah, she got this Netflix deal, I guess, to make a movie about tobacco farmers in a rural part of Italy, in which we soon find out they are under the rule of a marquise as sharecroppers, and they're basically farming for no wages.
Right.
They're all slaves. This tobacco. They're basically slaves.
Yeah.
Which is a lot to deal with, and just how poor, destitute they are, and it's a lot to see it as like nonchalance. That this is just a way of life. They don't know anything else. This is just kind of how they've been living for generations. It looks like there's like maybe up to 40 people living in this one household. Like at least three families put together, all these generations, and so they mostly work through this middleman who goes into town and get them what little by way of luxuries and convenience. But then this middleman tells him one day that the Marquise is going to show up called, was it the Viper, I think is her nickname, something like that. And that y'all need to get your shit ready because she's going to show up and it's not going to be good if you don't have your sharecropping ass together. So she shows up and she has this son who's like really done with her attitude and way of being as a full angsty teen is.
He definitely seems like he's currently in college and just read the Communist Manifesto or something.
For sure. for sure. So yeah, he shows up and is completely done with just, you know, being around his mother, bossing around and clearly holding slaves.
Yeah.
But yet he's just living with it.
It should also be noted that in the first half of this movie, it is hard to tell what historical time period you are in.
Right. Yes, right. I mean, it's so set in this rural space that it's just like every now and then you get hints that it's the present because it's like, oh, these people have cell phones, but they're kind of flip burner phones, so I'm not quite sure even still. So yeah, right up until the Marquise and them show up, it's like it could be just like early 20th century for all I can tell. But so she shows up and basically says, y'all need to get your act together, do better. And the son's like, I'm gonna go run away and just
I'm gonna go live in a cave.
Well, it's a nice little spot that Lazzaro, the titular character, is like has for his relaxing area, but is basically just like a little cave area with some chickens and sheep and a little mat. But he's like, the son is like, I'm gonna go ransom myself. Basically, I'm going to say I'm being kidnapped, and he ropes Lazzaro into it to be his assistant,
his go-between.
Yes, his go-between for sure.
And we should probably not say much more than that.
Yeah.
It's a movie with a twist.
There's a twist, but I would at least like to say that there is a second half in which they do make it to the city. Now, how they get there and why is an interesting part in the way that their lives greatly change from now not living as sharecroppers anymore.
There's the rural half of the movie and the urban half of the movie.
And whether or not that was a good or bad thing, and if for nothing else, because they were living in a bad place, but how much the promise of modernity and technology has failed a lot of people is the linchpin of the second half and the feeling of
because the first half of the movie,
melancholy,
despite like literally being about slavery, is pastoral in a way. These are people who, for the most part, take care of themselves at a great remove from the people who are enslaving them. They kind of have free reign to live as they wish. They don't want for much, because they are growing their own food. And in the urban half of the movie, things are more bleak, despite the fact that they are more free.
Right. The undercurrent about being stuck in the rural area happens pretty soon when it opens on a wedding, I guess, or a potential wedding, in which the couple then's like, hey, we need to get out of town, and they try to hop the truck back into town, and it's like, no, you need to stay here because y'all are barely making a living as it is, and you need to stay. And there's just this feeling of being stuck that then carries on to that second half, which I would recommend. Lazzaro is a very good blank slate character. I don't know if I'd say as good as, Dougie is.
Yeah. He definitely gives some Dougie vibes. He gives some Chaplin's the Tramp vibes. He even has that a little wall.
Yeah, he's like a very stocky character, right? Like his whole build is to just kind of lump around and do things that people ask him.
And in a way, his happiness and his yes man attitude is being criticized by the film because people like Lazzaro are the reason why the enslavement system is able to subsist without any sort of retribution, right? He just accepts his fate, no matter how unjust of a fate that might be. But the movie is also always showing you the other side of the coin as well, and what total freedom looks like. Freedom without security, right?
Right. And to that point, then, when he kind of tries to, in his own way, set things right in a very potentially regressive manner, it's not great for Lazzaro. But I'd recommend it. I know, Andrew, that you were kind of mild at it, or that you said you enjoyed more thinking about it after you were done.
I really enjoyed watching the first half. I enjoyed thinking about the second half. I felt like the second half made the point that it needed to make in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it kept going for another 50 or so.
Yeah.
So I felt that it got a little tedious and a little wandery by the end of the film, though that's probably by design.
Intentional, yeah.
I enjoy the structure of the movie. I think it has a really clear break down the middle, and it has some nice magical realist fairy tale elements that help weave the two worlds of the movie together. It has a great ending that leaves on this kind of poetic, ambiguous note. But ultimately, I was very much left cold by where it ends up going. Not because I didn't think it was a logical place to go, but because I think that it could have been more engaging, like the first half of the film was.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it doesn't really unfold in the same way that the first half does.
I mean, I guess to that point, then, is it could be the hit and miss nature of this kind of blank slate character. I think it was just a time of day thing for me. I was in the right mood for this movie, to where that second half and how it unfolds really got to me. And I didn't think it I mean, I agree that it is more meandering part of it, but I thought it was catching glimpses of how these people were able to subsist.
And I watched it before bed, but after watching the movie Western, which is much, much slower. And I think I was maybe in the mood for something a bit more immediate. So you're probably right that it probably has to do with the atmosphere in which you watch it.
But so to your point, though, of whether or not you can hold on to this blank slate character, I think at least has something to do with it, considering him being the focal point and him and his wanderings, whether or not you can hold on to that or not. But it
is one of the most unique movies of the year.
Sure.
One of the most surprising movies of the year in terms of where it ends up going. And it's a really philosophical film, so there's a lot to chew on in a cerebral sense while you're watching it. So I think we would both recommend this for sure.
I would,
your mileage may vary a little bit, but Happy as Lazzaro is on Netflix. You should watch it.
I guess this episode is just sponsored by Netflix, but
It is. For good and for ill. Don't watch Bird Box.
All right, we're going to take a short break. We'll be talking movie in part 2.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
Back with part 2 of episode 227 of Cinematary. In this part, we'll be continuing our Listener's Choice series with 1978's Movie. This comes from Dave Vinson. Dave has two kind of connected messages. The first one was on our Facebook page. He says, I've been listening to your podcast since I first heard of it at the Knoxville Horror Film Festival. I enjoy it consistently, although the condescending tone of this week's episode got a little tedious. I believe that episode was... I'm trying to think of which specific one.
That was the one where Nathan talked about Annihilation.
Yes, he did. So whichever episode that, I think it was the Bigger Than Life episode.
Was it Bigger Than Life?
Yeah.
It was Bigger
He
Than
says,
Life.
I'm 60, have no idea what Venmo is, and have only a passing knowledge of Tumblr, and have never visited it. And there are certainly much worse 2018 films than Annihilation, so I'm not sure why it deserved that angry screed that still seems to be going on. I likewise can't connect with the hatred of Ex Machina. Did Alex Garland steal that dude's girlfriend? I found that like an entertaining comment. He also emailed and said that he is a math professor at Pellissippi State. I have been a big movie fan since I got my driver's license at 16. I think I have seen around 3,000 movies and have been part of a weekly movie group that meets 40 to 45 times a year and has been doing so for nearly 30 years. I wonder if we'll get to that point in our Cinematary lore. I don't know.
Whew. We can't be young critics watch old movies anymore.
At that point, no. I do all sorts of crazy list projects. It's a math obsessive OCD thing. Currently trying to come up with a personal sorting of contemporary directors. I'm defining that as any director with a theatrical release of a new movie in any year since 2008, which honestly sounds super interesting. So, Dave, thank you so much for emailing in and sending us a message. We're going to dig into Movie, which was one of his suggestions. Movie came out in 1978. It was directed by Stanley Donen from a script by Larry Gelbart and Sheldon Keller. The film stars George C. Scott, Trish Van Devere, Barry Bostwick, Red Buttons, Art Carney, Eli Wallach, Harry Hamlin, Barbara Harris, and Anne Reiking. Consists of two films, Dynamite Hands, a boxing ring morality play, and Baxter's Beauties of 1933, a musical comedy. A fake trailer for a flying ace movie set in World War I entitled Zero Hero, also starring George C. Scott, is shown between the double feature. The film is introduced by George Burns, who tells viewers that they were about to see an old-style double feature. In the old days, he explains movies were in black and white, except sometimes, quote, when they sang it came out in color. And the theatrical release, as Burns leads us to what to expect in the film's prologue, Dynamite Hands and the mock film trailer were in black and white, while the musical Baxter's Beauties of 1933 was in color. Some home video editions featured the original color version of Dynamite Hands, which was printed in black and white film stock during its theatrical release, though. Lou Grade liked the movie so much that he commissioned Larry Gelbart to write a sequel. However, the movie failed at the box office, and Grade blamed that on poor distribution by Warner Brothers. After its limited...
Two movie.
It's two movies. After its limited release in November of 1978, it disappeared from cultural memory, existing as a marginal cult item. At one point, the VHS was selling for $55 on Amazon. And that's really all I have note-wise on this movie. I have some reviews, but there's not much on this on the internet. Pauline Kael called it a pair of skillful parodies. Variety called it a flat-out embarrassment. And the New York Times said the appearance of movie at this point in a dreary season restores my confidence in the joys to be had from Hollywood flim-flamming at its elegant best. So
maybe there's not a lot of this about this on the internet because it's incredibly hard to search for.
Yeah, that's true. Help Google find a movie for me.
Here are all the movies.
All of them.
That is true.
Oh, you wanted 2 or 2?
Are you looking for... Are you one of 2 of the movies that are out? Okay. I feel like a good starting point for this is just the structure of it being a double feature. I saw a lot in some of the notes that I did find about this. They compared it to Tarantino's Grindhouse.
It's not a joke anymore. It's just a point.
Yeah, it's just a point. No, that's what they kind of compared it to, and I feel like that's another one that. While we talked about Death Proof on this podcast and we're really high on it, when it came out, it was not like theatrically well received at either the box office or critically, it seemed like. And this was kind of the same way. So I kind of wanted to lead that into an intro discussion of, does the kind of mock double feature, ever since that kind of went out of vogue, the mock double feature to kind of bring in that nostalgia factor and kind of play with that format. Does it work with both this one and Grindhouse? Is it something that will work? Because it seems like it has not played very well with audiences in these 2 instances.
I mean, for this one, I feel like there's a significant difference between just 2 movies put together and literally like 2 45-minute things that are called movies put together. Because the difference, they're both like kind of send-up in its own way, send-ups of those kind of genres. Particularly not that surprising with Stanley Donen because he did Singing in the Rain and Charade, and they're all kind of parody movies condensed down. But
the second movie here is maybe a reimagining of Singing in the Rain in a way.
Through 30s lens, for sure. But the difference is the Grindhouse stuff can kind of play out and feel full and character beats and things like this. While this one's just how can we condense those beats into 45 minutes and string them together with one-liners?
So a problem gets introduced in one room, and then the character walks out of that room to the next room, and then the solution is right there in that room.
Very good.
Because we have to move quick.
Yeah.
Because we're telling a whole a genre structure in 45 minutes.
Which does lead to a lot of goofs. But whether or not it is fulfilling in that way, I don't know. Or is feels as nostalgic when it's just burning through the movie's plot in 45 minutes. I'm not sure.
When I read the synopsis of this, I really thought it was going to be a little bit more meta than it ended up being. I thought that it would be a really interesting pairing with Adaptation, which you guys talked about last week.
Right.
Being a movie that is not just playing movie tropes, but talking about movies and criticizing those tropes or something like that. And really what we have here are just 2 movies. The title is Movie, Another Movie.
You get 2 for 1.
Though the choice to have a trailer in the middle of them and then an introduction at the beginning, it made me feel like there was going to be some sort of capper at the end to bring it full circle. No. And then the second movie just ends in the credits.
The end, where the end zooms right into George C. Scott's dead body on the floor.
George C. Scott is not very fortunate in either of these films.
That's true. Poor George C. Scott.
Well, I feel like this kind of goes back to a discussion that we've had a little bit throughout the year. I think more specifically about anthology kind of structured movies. I know, Andrew, that you caught one during the Knox Horror Festival, and then Lydia talked about Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is also kind of that anthology format. And it's interesting when you kind of take the trying to condense a movie into, I guess, a condensed version of that, which seems more in line with an episode of television, but they're still trying to keep up the establishment of a movie. And it's I think that it's especially kind of curious to watch that in 2018, where, you know, the lines that kind of are delineated between what is a movie and what is a television, you know, because there's these kind of hour and a half long episodes of television that are structured within the, you know, the long ranging form of television compared to being a movie. And I feel like this also kind of is this kind of confused line between, you know, is it like, how do you work that anthology format into a feature length form without making it seem contrived?
It's definitely an anthology film, in that it has kind of a gimmick that all the stories in the anthology play by, which is that we have the same cast in both versions. So you get to see George C. Scott play kind of like a grizzled old boxing coach. Then you get to see him play kind of like a dandy sophisticate in the second half. And so it's interesting as like a showcase of acting talent or something, or maybe an exposure of like the phoniness of acting in the first place. You believe in these characters even though, you know,
making it a send-up
theoretically you know that they are just faking all this. And also I think that it does have somewhat of what Buster Scruggs has in terms of a thematic through line. Buster Scruggs, all those short films are about death in one way or another. Here, both of these stories are about like the ethical dilemmas that come up between choosing money over one's own personal integrity. Both of them are done in ways that are fairly cliche. And it is the fact that it has that thematic concern in the middle of it is as much of a trope as anything else in the films. Dylan, you're cracking up over here.
Well, I agree. There's, I mean, a thing that we've kind of brought up in passing and trying to talk about this movie and its kind of tropeness is how it's strung together with these one-liners, right? Can we get up some of those?
Oh my gosh. Dylan and I were just losing it throughout this thing, because the movie seems to be built upon imagine the movie is a house. Every brick of the house is the cheesiest one-liner you have ever heard.
But it's all filled with mixed metaphors too. It's just like, why? Okay, can you read some of these?
I'm gonna read a lot.
Okay,
this is gonna be the segment of the show where I just quote, because the IMDb quotes page for this is just
it's full.
It's a lot.
God.
When a man says what's right, what's good, what's real, and what's true, then his mouth is 10 feet tall.
Who's to say? I don't know. Is he lying? I don't.
You know what they charge for an eye? An arm and a leg. I can see with one eye tied behind my back.
Good.
Funny, isn't it? How many times your guts can get a slap in the face? Don't tell me my business. I've taped more hands than you've got in your whole head.
So much.
Let's see, there's more. Your sister's eyes are below the belt. After a girl's had a taste of mink, she can't go back to pastrami.
So, like, this...
No, there's more. Don't stop me.
No, okay.
It may not show up on an x-ray, but your heart is pure silk, too.
Thank you.
These hands are for reading books.
That was good.
These just sound like greeting
We
card
cannot
notes, you know?
We cannot bring Gloves Malloy's death back to life.
It's true. Kill him twice.
Do you think you could write a Broadway score? Oh, it's been my lifelong dream for years.
God.
If any part of the human body has a tendency to break down, the eyes have it.
True.
Age before beauty. After you.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. I got one or two more. No, actually, that's the last one.
Okay, so
there's so many. It's like your friend who just makes the worst pun, and like even if you like puns on an abstract level, you're like, oh my god, shut up. That's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. So I think that is either going to make this a delightful experience for you, or it's going to make it insufferable.
Right. So I mean the first one being like a condition of body and soul and like the setup as a boxing movie together, and so it includes like a sister who needs an eye exam, and Eli Wallach as a gangster who's going to provide him as an easy way out to get to the Garden, as Madison Square Garden, to get the big bucks. And it's just, as Andrew said, just pulling it through with one-liners to kind of get you to the tropes and the story and the message as fast as possible.
Because if the one-liners weren't there,
how would they do that?
It might feel way more flat.
Yeah, just completely weighty. And to the point that it even, you could say, builds up to a whole musical filled with one-liners.
Yes.
Because the composer is it. We're not going to try to do it. I can't do it.
But the composer's name?
Yeah.
The composer's name?
Oh, yes. God help me. I forgot. Please go ahead. What's the composer's name?
So in the second half of the film, the composer's name is... I'm reminded of In a Lonely Place when we talked about Dick Steele. This is Dick Cummings.
Great.
And his final musical number ends in a bunch of white streamers,
confetti, just
being thrown on the faces of all the actors.
Who knows what that's about? Why would they do that in that musical number?
Also, while we're talking about one-liners, let's talk about lyrics.
Okay.
To the
poor Andrew.
Can I find? Let's see. Are there lyrics to Movie Movie 1978 on Google? This is the hardest movie to search for.
So maybe
I can't find the lyrics,
but it's like he puts like 3 words together to like kind of make some kind of rhythm, and it's
only made of couplets. All the lyrics are just couplets, and the first line in the couplet is just a series of 3 to 4 words that rhyme, like sing, ring, ding, thing, and then the second line is always the gal, gotta find the gal, or something like that. And it's the same line again and again.
Guy shy my eye.
Guy shy my eye. No. Gotta find the girl. It was killing me, man.
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be a joke.
Well,
it was incredibly. It was insufferable.
It was a lot. But so I guess maybe one of the so that one's particularly a send up of like those musical comedies from the 30s, like Gold Diggers of 1933 and those mini sequels. But to be fair to that meet cute situation, where it's like, can this go faster? Can they meet cute faster? They were literally just standing in front of like the marquee and like looking at a poster for what's his name, Spats Baxter's new
Beauties
play
of 1933.
Thank you. And then she's excited. She's a new girl in town trying to get an audition, and he's the bookkeeper, then turned composer later. And what happens? Oh, they bump into each other. He rips off her skirt, underwear, and then just as it happens, accidentally, a cake comes up from a delivery system on the.
And they're standing on top of a wedding cake like 2 little figurines.
As if already on a wedding, and it says, "Well, doesn't that take the cake?" It's like, yes, it does. Good job.
So that's kind of the result of trying to condense a musical romantic comedy into 45 minutes. When usually a musical is 3+ hours in the classical sense, right?
It can be.
So that's even more of a tall order than condensing a boxing film.
So, but, to be fair, as Andrew kind of tries to caveat, your mileage can vary based on the quips galore or specific one-liners to get you through. So there's fun to be had, I would say.
I think we had a fun time watching it together.
Right. Maybe watch it with a friend. That can help. 2 people for a movie would be the way to go. So people for movie. That's what,
people.
Oh my God, Dylan.
See,
what?
That's the kind of joke that
we were infected by this movie. What do you want? This is what happened.
But still,
That's what you get, Zach.
That's what we get as people to watch movie.
That's what you get
on their couch in their house.
You got it.
The rotating cast kind of also seems to play into that. I guess the easiest connection would be like Christopher Guest movies, mainly because they're comedies. But you kind of have that like the ability to like take the kind of same people and implant them into different kind of genre movies, and it seems like this one is successful in the same way as like Christopher Guest doing multiple movies with like Eugene Levy and the other rotating people.
I would maybe say the comparison, or the point of comparison, might be the Monty Python films, especially
How wacky
Meaning
they
of
are.
Life, where you're getting all these vignettes and
Quickly.
they're all the exact same cast, and almost every woman is played by
can
a
see
man
that.
and things like that.
Not in this case. But
Not in this case.
They're not British enough, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder what this would be like if it was condensed even further.
Oh, God.
And really, there were 4 or 5
Andrew,
different narratives that they just speed run through. You know, there's the complete works of Shakespeare in like 3 hours or whatever that is.
Andrew,
That would be fascinating to see here.
Andrew, I think that's kind of called a Guy Madden film on some level.
yeah?
Where it's just like 10-minute vignettes, and there he's gonna hit you with them as fast as possible. So, but his situation's even wackier, where he's like intentionally like plays with the filmmaking and makes things melt and bleed together, and
where this is really concerned with trying to capture an authentic aesthetic
from before.
The boxing film, the 30s style boxing film, really does feel like a movie that was plucked out of the 30s.
Sure, yeah, as hammy as it is.
Musical maybe a little bit less so.
Right.
It doesn't have the big, like, bombastic, colorful sets in the same way.
You only get one, but even then, that's in black and white. That's trying to be like a Busby Berkeley situation. It's like 10 seconds.
But I think it would... I wonder almost if the trailer in the middle, if they actually shot that full movie, or
That's
they
a good
shot
question.
as much of it as they possibly could, and then they had to tear it down into a trailer for whatever reason. Again, I think it would be fascinating to see like how quickly they could speed run through these genres with the same cast.
Yeah.
Because the quips kind of buoy the thing.
Right.
But there is kind of a thudding tedium to like seeing these very obvious
Tropes,
push and pull for the characters being established, and you know what direction it's going to end up going. You still have to sit through it, and it's only 45 minutes, but because the movie predicates itself upon playing on genre tropes, you know exactly where it's going to go, and it does kind of play it straight. There are funny lines sprinkled throughout, but the narrative itself is played completely straight. I mean, the boxing film ends in a courtroom scene where somebody says, "The real winner here was love."
That's true. And he is the boxer who says he's going to get his law degree, and by God, in the last 5 minutes, he gets his law degree and puts that gangster behind bars. Yes, with love, clearly. Boy, yeah, seeing even more condensed version.
It's kind of like your mileage varies on like your. It's going back to the Buster Scruggs comparison. It's like your mileage varies on how much you appreciate the genre at hand. You know, if you are very invested into whatever genre is being spoofed, you'll probably enjoy it. But if you're just kind of like, what the hell is this?
It might be a lot.
Your mileage will go
I want to take this as an opportunity to publicly apologize for something, because in the pre-show ad or the mid-show ads, all the ones that are recorded by me, it always says, "Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain." Maybe Zach will put that in this episode too, because way back in the day when we did a musical series, this was like the second year or something of Cinematary existing, and this was in a phase that I am now ashamed of, where I was like, as a general rule, I don't like musicals. Musicals are bad. And I watched Singing in the Rain for that series, and I didn't like it. I'm not going to say that I like Singing in the Rain now, because I haven't rewatched it, and I don't know if I can say for sure.
Fair.
But I love musicals. Musicals are a delightful genre. And I think that I don't want anybody to drag me further for this being a Stanley Donen musical. So just want to cut that off at the pass.
Make a continual burn.
There are people like rearing at their keyboards who are like,
Yep. But
well, we can't get Andrew on this one.
Next time.
I mean, he did a lot better with Singing in the Rain, I think. I mean, even then, that's like a convention too, but it's a parody like this one is, but it does feel like it plays it straight. I mean, you have Gene Kelly, playing it up, but he's mostly as a straight that kind of character. He's not, I don't know.
Which it's interesting that George C. Scott is like the top billed actor in this, because he is the straight man in both.
That's true. Yeah, he really. he plays like the moral straight-laced character.
He doesn't have quips.
Not really. Not in that same way. Literally everyone will do it around him.
It almost seems like a star vehicle for
kind of
George C. Scott.
Okay.
But it's weird that it's reminding you of the constructedness of it the whole time, so you can't really believe his performance.
Right. I mean, and it doesn't,
an oddity.
And it doesn't go as like broad and ridiculous as he is in Doctor Strangelove.
No.
Or even as self-serious as he is in Patton or something like that. So it's like, where does this lay for George C. Scott, or what was his role in accepting these situations?
And I think of something like The Changeling or Paul Schrader's Hardcore. George C. Scott can really add like dramatic weight to any performance. But like the artificiality of what's going on in a movie make it very hard for him to do that, and it doesn't allow him to be the ham that he is in Doctor Strangelove either. So he's in this weird in between space.
And that maybe also kind of plays to the your mileage may vary with the shtick that it's kind of doing. Is you have this person who you kind of have a perception of, and even he does not really know what he needs to do in order to successfully entertain you in this role.
Yeah, I mean, which is funny because it's like he's doing the thing, but it's just like he's playing it so straight. It's just I mean, whether or not he seems rather straight in what he's doing, but it's just, come on, is this really all George C. Scott is here to be, this character? But it is.
He wears like a smoking jacket for most of the second movie.
Yeah,
there's fun to be had there.
Right,
but his character doesn't really get to have much of it.
I guess kind of going back to the initial question, but in a different fashion. I mean, what about this do you think kind of missed with the audiences in 1978? Was it just I don't know what this is?
Maybe.
Or, because like I said, it just seems like these kind of these structured movies don't necessarily work in movie form. But I feel like I've also kind of found I could see this being kind of akin to like Arrested Development or something, where it's just in its absurdity.
I wonder if 70s we kind of get these nostalgic moments, particularly where we want to look back, and so like Bogdanovich did that with What's Up Doc in his own way, and Paper Moon specifically as like a period piece.
And then I guess
kind of thing.
The Last Picture Show is kind of like an anti-nostalgia, or like a mourning.
I would say a mourning for sure. So I mean, I wonder. Oh God, I'm right. This is after American Graffiti and things like that. This is 78. So there's just like a lot of.
Also in the war one, it has the scroll. 1 year after Star Wars too.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the 70s, there was a lot of look back and wanting to see nostalgic things, these old kind of forms coming back with new life. And so I don't know, hesitate to say they did this cynically, because, I mean, playing it this straight, you'd be like, I kind of doubt there's not love to this in some strange way, but it's like, what exactly were the motivation in making this? Was it really to just condense down these movies and these scenarios that you love, or were you really just kind of going in for a kind of nostalgic cash-in? I mean, because we know Donen can do it as a director, at least, and that might be very well why he was brought on to do it. But clearly it was pretty lackluster for people in the 70s, right? From what you said at the beginning. So I don't know. I mean, they kind of said it was a distribution problem, but it's just right.
It could have been a distribution problem. It could also be, I think, that some of those nostalgic films from the 70s you brought up, like American Graffiti or even Star Wars, were just kind of nostalgic for the Flash Gordon and stuff like that. These are
not going that further back.
These are movies that are really loving in their indulgence of nostalgia, and they really just like want you to swim in it and like feel like how, in a way, how like fun and like sweeping those old movies were, or those times were, maybe in the case of American Graffiti. And this is a movie that like halfway wants you to poke fun at it, and it's not really giving you that indulgence that you want if your goal is to look lovingly back on this era.
That's a good point.
I mean, I don't know if there's like a critique here.
Right.
It is not saying much about these films, but it's like doing it in this cockeyed, halfway jokey way where you can't really take it seriously, and so you can't really get swept up in it.
Right.
Any final thoughts on movie before we end? I kind of wanted to do a all-encompassing listener's choice question, but I'm going to leave for any final thoughts from you guys on this one.
I don't know if I have anything else. Dylan, you got anything?
Any like a recommendation?
What do you mean? Oh, do we recommend movie? Oh, I mean, it's something.
Yeah.
It's also free on Amazon Prime, so you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, it's a unique thing unique as in its parody, but it is from a thing from the 70s. It feels of its own.
Take a shot every time you hear a pun or a mixed metaphor.
God help your liver.
So now that we've gone through our listener's choice series, this is just kind of a fun, weird question. What do you think that these three choices says about us and why they chose this for us?
What does
Which
it say
is
about
Marathon
us,
Man
or what do they say about our
adaptation.
listeners?
Both and?
Or I guess, what do they want to hear from us? I don't know. Like, what
Let's
sense are you making
psychoanalyze
from
our
these
listeners.
selections?
Well, two of them
Let's
are from the 70s.
let's just psychoanalyze what they think of us.
So, I mean, some of them might be recommendations of movies they don't think people have seen enough. I mean, this especially, the person, Dave even said it was like or you said at the beginning that was kind of a cult find.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to recommend it in of itself is like, here's a neat, unique thing that you may have never heard of before.
I think is one of the things that our podcast is good at. It's something that we get criticized for from people who don't consistently listen to the show. We tell people at the podcast and like, yeah, I haven't really seen any of the movies you guys talk about, so I don't really listen. You know, we are often, sometimes we'll do a Rebel Without a Cause episode, like a really iconic title that everybody should know, but a lot of times we are digging into stuff that we're really unfamiliar with. And, to stick with the Nicholas Ray series, like The Lusty Men is not like a big Nicholas Ray film. We are kind of looking for the deep cuts in a way. So I think that movie is a good example of that. And I think that two of these three are also meta movies between adaptation and movie. So I think that this kind of came up when we were doing our live Slumber Party Massacre show. Somebody asked the question, like, is this movie going to play for an audience that maybe isn't thinking about it on such a meta level as you guys are? And I think that we do tend to look at movies through that kind of lens of like, what is it doing with genre and what is it doing with tropes and the typical form of this sort of film. So I think that adaptation and movie are really interesting case studies in
differences of anything else.
Yeah.
Right. So but I don't know, Marathon Man might just be like, hey, paranoid 70s thriller. I'm not sure what else to make it that as like a
we've
sweeping
done quite
thing.
a few of those. I'm like
We
Blowout,
have. Okay, that's true.
for example. I'm blanking on a couple of the others, but I know that there have been.
And Nathan wanted to talk about like its comparisons to Columbia grad school, so that's
Columbia,
that was a
New York.
driving factor as well.
That's true.
That's fair.
I don't know if that's like the scholarly answer that we should give, but like that was a driving factor.
a personal investment, which is good for us. We were willing to do it. So
Yeah, I think we should do this again next year, and maybe we can get more picks too.
Yeah, get some more deep cuts, guys. We like those deep cuts. We're rebranding ourselves as the Deep Cuts Podcast. I got no response to that, so it was a very pregnant pause.
It's honest. It's honest.
without being morbid, that's all. That's why I'm hesitating. It's okay.
Okay.
Jeez.
All right. Well, I believe that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we'll be wrapping up 2018 with our top 10 films of the year. Always a fun exercise for the Cinematary participants. We have people putting in their list now. Seems like it's going to be an interesting one. It always is an interesting one. We always have some curious picks. So,
can we just see what spot Bird Box takes on our top 10?
It's sitting right now at a firm number 1, but we'll see if it goes down. We have Bird Box, and then we have Annihilation, and then we have Vice. So it's going to be just great.
Hey, I want to say to Dave Vinson, don't go back and listen to when we reviewed Annihilation when it first came out, because I was very negative on the movie. It has grown on me. I think Annihilation is a good movie. It was one of my my honorable mentions when I did my top 10 for Arts Knoxville. So don't let Nathan spoil the Annihilation party.
The end of the world Annihilation party.
We're making the end of the world great again.
He and Alex Garland just got to work out their stuff. It's fine. It's not a big deal. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.